Okay, I'm going to kick things off. So welcome to the third and final talk of our interactive AI, Bristol Interactive AI Summer School Speaker Series. We are delighted to be able to welcome Ben Shneiderman to come and give a talk. Ben is a distinguished university professor in the Department of Computer Science at the University of Maryland. He almost... I was going to read through your short bio, Ben, but it wasn't very short. So I'm going to do a very truncated version. He's very well known for his contributions, particularly in human-computer interaction, the concepts of direct manipulation, some very formative work in information visualization, and on highlighted textual links. Many students of HCAI will know him from his textbook writing, in particular designing the user interface, which is a set text on many or most human-computer interaction courses. And I suspect you might be the most cited person in human-computer interaction. I'm not sure. You have a Google Scholar H index of 126, and I wasn't able to find anyone with a higher one. So let's end on that. He's going to be talking about human-centered artificial intelligence, reliable, safe, and trustworthy. Over to you, Ben.
Thank you, Paul, and thanks to the other organizers for making this possible. Yes, I have long worked on human-computer interaction. It's been my passion to do that, and yes, I do write a lot, and I'm pleased that people have liked what I write. My parents were journalists, so I knew that writing was hard, and cutting and pasting was scissors and tape and glue in those days. And so I learned that it was a difficult and repeated process. So I just get on with it. And I'm pleased that my work has been influential, as you cite, and appreciate your mentioning that. I'm also proud of the University of Maryland's Human-Computer Interaction Lab, which is getting close to 40 years going and now on its 9th director. So it's a wonderful community that's created many things that have contributed to our modern technology, including one of the great moments of the link. I'm pleased to be known as the link man, who the idea of the web link, that certain words are highlighted in text and you point to them and click on them, was the work that came in from the mid-1980s. And you mentioned direct manipulation and its many variants, especially the touchscreen and the tiny 3-inch keyboards that when we submitted the paper on a 3-inch keyboard, the reviewers did not believe that we could do that at the time. And so we produced a video to show that it actually was possible. So that's been a great and satisfying career, but I'm always looking to the future, and the best is yet to come, as I say. And so that's what this topic is about. And so if you look at the slides, we're talking about human-centered AI, and certainly AI, the large topic, and we want to make sure that it's reliable, safe, and trustworthy. Well, that's a bigger journey. So the question is, what is human-centered AI? Well, there's a longer discussion, but it's a set of processes that many of you study HCI will know well, from observation of users, ethnographic methods, interviews, surveys, and then iterative design with stakeholder participation, usability testing, release mechanisms, and constant and continuous refinement. So those are the processes and the products and the strategies. As you mentioned, direct manipulation remains the driving force for the 3 million apps that are on the App Store, but it's not universal. And we have an agenda that's unfulfilled. And so it is the AI community that has a different model and a different view. So I'm going to try to offer a way to bridge HCI and AI. And for me, the goal is not autonomous intelligent agents, but we want technologies that amplify, augment, empower, and enhance people. That's where we're at. We want people to be the ones. We want great algorithms which we measure and show that they're effective and rapid and so on. But we also want to show that these designs enhance human performance, that we can measurably show how performance is improved. You may look at my picture here, and I worked hard in this book that I've been working on, which will come out from Oxford University in January 2022 about human-centered AI. There's no robots in this picture. And that's an important notion of shifting attention. We're into how do we use technology to empower people to work together in small groups and large groups, remotely, and so on, so that they succeed. So, you know, one of the great successes of HCI is Zoom. For all the tiring times we spend on Zoom, it's still, to me, remarkable to get on and be able to you know, see the collaborators in this event and be able to speak to you comfortably from where I am, which is actually Vancouver, to where you are in Bristol and beyond. So the success of HCI is enormous and widespread, and those 3 million apps that people use by billions of people daily are a testimony. So that's the question, and the question, you know, has, to me, 3 answers, and that's what this talk will be about. We'll talk about the HCAI framework, we'll talk about the design metaphors, and we'll talk about the governance structure. So those are the 3. The first set is the HCAI framework. And this takes me back to the notion that was put forward by Tom Sheridan and Bill Verplank in the late 70s and followed through in the 80s and remained the dominant thinking, which was called the levels of automation. And the assumption was you went from level 0 to level 10. 0 was human control, and 10 was full computer automation, okay? And the belief was, which I followed in my 1986 first edition of Designing the User Interface, that you had to choose some point between human control and computer automation. If you got more automation, you had less human control. It was a zero-sum game. And in my early edition, that's what I wrote. And it was a puzzle to think about how much automation you could achieve and how much human control would be left. But I became less and less comfortable with that notion. And in the later edition of the book, I shifted to the notion of ensuring human control while increasing automation. When I first wrote that, ensuring human control while increasing automation, it was actually a puzzle to me as well. I wasn't sure what I meant by that. And in the ensuing years, I've got more and more clear and more firm in saying that's really what we want to do. And the future is of designs that ensure human control while increasing the level of automation. It may be in simple ways that we reinterpret the world around us, and the thermostat, one can see as a device that functions automatically, but actually it's a way that gives me greater control of the temperature in my home. And so we have to understand that the designs we want are ones that increase human control by using more effective automation that's reliable, safe, and trustworthy. And the breakthrough in thinking was to suggest that actually there are 2 dimensions. You separate out human control and computer automation, and that these are 2 different domains, and there are ways that you can get both. And so that led to this notion of the HCAI framework, which I prefer to represent as a 2-dimensional chart. And so this is the basic idea, the reframe thinking from the levels of automation to the idea of 2-dimensional thinking. Now, in this case, so one dimension is computer automation from low to high, and then human control from low to high. So there are times we want a high degree of computer automation, the pacemaker embedded in your chest, maybe, the airbag deployment system in your car. It has to react in 200 milliseconds to be successful. So it's a fully automated system. And to build fully automated systems requires a very special, careful design principles, testing, and continued assessment over time. You may know that airbags save about 2,500 lives each year in the US, at least, and more around the world. But the early versions killed 200 children and elders each year inadvertently when the airbags deployed improperly. And it took a while till people understood this, until emergency room data became widely available. And so the correction could be made to have sensors built in about passenger seats and so on. So even there, we went from automation to better automation and improving that and making certain degree of human control and oversight of it through the emergency room data. At the same time, there are times we want high levels of human control or autonomy. When I ride my bicycle or play a piano, I want to be able to play around, make mistakes, do something creative, improve my mastery of that skill. And so I want to be fully in control. I don't want computers in those situations. Now, computers, I might take them to teach me to play the piano or improve the bicycle, but basically I want to see it as a high human control. Now, the sweet spot and the place we're looking for and the place we'll spend our time in this talk is about how we get to reliable, safe, and trustworthy. I've mentioned, the issues of elevator or camera. The elevator is a simple example. It's become so familiar and trustworthy. We walk up, we press the button that says up, the light goes on to show that the elevator is on its way. The door is open, we step in, we press the 6th or 16th floor, and the doors close, and we see we're going from 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 6. The door is open and we're out. So that happens for a lot of reasons, but that's kind of the sense of a great set of automation, lots of AI, lots of automation going on, but basically the things I care about, I'm in control over. That's what's important. I think the digital camera is a more interesting example with richer possibilities that show how you get both. You, the user, are in control of where you point the camera, how much you zoom, and then your decisive moment when you click to get the picture you want. And you see it in advance. It's a preview that shows you what's going to happen when you click the picture. And you get exactly what happens on what you see on your screen. At the same time, there's a lot of AI going on. There's a lot of AI in setting the aperture, in making the focus happen, in reducing hand jitter, lots and lots of AI going on. But it's for the things that can be done reliably, safely, and trustworthy while giving humans control over the features they want. That is the composition and where they point their camera and when they take their picture. And so that's the kind of strategies that you want to have. A nuanced, what I call fine structure of design, which says some features are automated, some features are preserved under human control. And as you look carefully at advanced designs, that's what you'll see. And that's what increasingly I come to understand, which features we want to automate where possible to make reliable, and which features we want to ensure human control. Now, this framework also has some reminders of the problems of excessive automation on the far right of this model. And that was never considered in the levels of automation models, but there is a chance that we do too much automation. The suggestion from the National Transportation Safety Board that Tesla did too much automation in the design of the Tesla autopilot. There's a clear evidence of excessive autonomous and automation behavior in the 737 MAX crashes. The designers were so confident that they could build a fully automated, autonomous, correct system that they did not even inform the pilots of its existence. That led to 2 plane crashes and 346 deaths. Tragic, tragic outcomes that could have been avoided if the mentality of design had been shifted from the idea of autonomy to the idea of humility. And that's where we want to go. Designers should understand that systems are likely to fail in one way or another, and they need to prevent. At the other side, at the top of this two-dimensional diagram, is the space of excessive human control. And there are dangers that pilots and car drivers will make mistakes. And so we want to prevent mistakes and from those happening. There are simple cases such as self-cleaning ovens. If you put it on self-cleaning and the temperature is above 600 degrees Fahrenheit, you cannot open the door. There's an interlock, a guard to prevent you from doing it and from causing a dangerous burst of hot air, which would be harmful to you. Similarly, with automobiles, there's a great deal of talk about self-driving cars, which is the wrong emphasis. I want a safe driving car first. A safe driving car first, then we can do self-driving. And safe driving cars have systems already. We see emerging of collision avoidance by stopping you from hitting the car in front of you, and lane following that ensures that you stay in the correct lane. The Institute for Highway Safety has very clear evidence that you can prevent more accidents with collision avoidance, but you can prevent more deaths by preserving lane following. Deadly accidents happen when cars move out of lane and hit other cars on the side and spin around in the traffic, or hit oncoming cars that will come straight at them. So these kind of mechanisms could be included in systems of many, many kinds, but we see it most in automobiles. So I'll just mention two other cases here in detail so you see the way that this two-dimensional model opens up design thinking. The morphine drip bag from World War II days was a great life-saving and helpful pain-relieving mechanism of a bag that dripped at a continuous rate morphine. And that was a good thing for many patients with great injuries. However, it could be dangerous because you could get too little morphine, which would mean you'd be in pain, or you could get too much morphine, which would mean it would overwhelm your system and kill you. And so the move was to an automatic dispenser that would limit the amount that you got, the amount of morphine based on monitoring heart rate and breathing and so on. So that was a good way to add automation, all right, and corrected some of the problems. But it did not deal with the issue of patient discomfort. There's no way to measure the levels of human pain, and so you need to go to a human-controlled, patient-guided dispenser. Humans get a trigger they can squeeze to get more morphine. But there are interlocks on that to prevent you from getting too much morphine. So these notions work together, and it shows you how the design possibilities become clearer when you think in this two-dimensional model. Where we're going with pain control devices, that the goal of reliable, safe, and trustworthy, patient-guided, but clinician monitored. So these systems, a hospital might have a dozen or 50 of these patient control systems, and there might be a central monitoring control room that would overview all of them and know if any of them had failed in one way or another, power supplies, or some drastic change, and they could then collect the data from all of these pain control devices and thereby improve the design and improve the care for patients, which is really the goal. So that's the kind of strategy. One more example in wheelchairs. The old-fashioned heavy wooden wheelchairs required a caretaker. So there was very low human control and low automation for patients. Robotic devices which navigate to a destination automatically are one possibility, but hand-powered user-guided became the dominant one because users wanted to be self-sufficient where possible. If they could, they would move their wheelchairs, and this led to creative ideas like wheelchair races and wheelchair basketball and soccer, football. So it led to interesting possibilities. And the future direction is motorized, joystick controlled, teleoperated, and also programmable. And so every wheelchair could be continuously monitored with the approval of the patient to track where it goes and how it's performing, and monitor the situation to improve it for all. So you get a good combination of human control now at multiple levels. In the same way that an aircraft, there's a degree of automation, there's a high level of automation in the engine of an airplane. Every millisecond, it's automatically adjusted. But minute by minute, the pilots control what's happening. And hour by hour, the air traffic controllers monitor what's happening. And week by week, the airline supervisors monitor what's happening. And year by year, the aviation authorities monitor what's happening. So the idea is that we embed social systems around the technical systems to monitor performance and accelerate improvements. Okay, so that's the basic idea of the framework, the two-dimensional model. And let me move on to the second key idea, which is the design metaphors. The old metaphors, which now seem like such a cliche, of a human hand shaking a robot hand, or pointing, touching fingers, or a humanoid robot standing next to a human, or even embracing a human. And I think that's another important thing we want to change. We want to change what our expectations are. So the old models use language like intelligent agents, teammates, collaborators, partners, assured autonomy, and social robots. These ideas are really cool. They sound wonderful. They're attractive. They're compelling. They invite research and other notions. However, they don't lead to successful commercial products. Social robots have been a long-term, hundreds of years in the making, but they just don't succeed. They're great publicity. Journalists love them. Hollywood builds on them, but social robots continue to fail in the marketplace. In the recent years, the highly touted, well-supported Jibo, Anki, Kuri, all failed. Asimo from Honda, and most recently, Pepper from SoftBank have been shut down. So there is, I don't see a future for social robots. They don't provide a purpose. Robots are, for me, the preference is we switch the language to these less charismatic, but more successful strategies of what I call super tools, telebots, control centers, and active appliances. So let's take a look at examples. And we start just to a simple reminder that robots are simply not people. Margaret Bowden from the UK. And humans, not robots, are responsible agents. That's the key distinctions to make here. And so the three guiding forces that lead us to these new approaches are responsibility. Only humans are responsible, liable, accountable, legally or morally. And that should guide our design and remind us that computers are not people and people are not computers. They're just a different category. And that's the way they are. And 100 years from now, we'll see that ever more clearly, even as computers become more complex and powerful. We want to take advantage of the distinctive capabilities of computers, the sophisticated algorithms, huge databases, superhuman sensors, information abundant displays, and the powerful effectors that are possible. And we'll look at some of those examples. But when you think of humanoid or human robots or social robots, the instinct is to design a robot that looks like a human, has 18-inch arms, and turns its hands. And those just are not going to be very useful, except for entertainment, crash test dummies, medical mannequins. There are some examples of when those will be useful. We want to support human creativity. There's nothing as wonderful as the passion, empathy, humility, and intuition that we as humans experience, and I hope you all will have in your research and educational experiences. So examples, I've mentioned the super tool of digital camera. There's so many things that you can control before you take the picture. You set it up, you have different kind of photos, and square, and different lighting conditions, and video, and time, slow motion, and time lapse, et cetera, panoramas. There's all kinds of choices you make about what the image will look like, what the tone and shading will be, and then you take your picture, and then you can edit it and change the luminance, brightness, contrast, and many other features. And then the digital camera tools are socially connected. They make it easy for you to send your picture around to others. That's the kind of systems we want. Similarly, the great commercial successes of navigation choices. Here, this is Google Maps, and I ask for a route from the White House in Washington, D.C. to College Park, just 8 miles away. It gives me 3 choices. That's great AI at work, but I'm in control. I choose what I want. I know what the implications are. If I choose a different route, it might take longer. It might be a further direction. It might be a more scenic route, or it might be a route with more traffic lights on. So I get to choose where I go, and then I initiate it. So we need the notion of preview first, then select and initiate, and then you can manage the execution. Even once you've selected this super tool to go to work for you, you can change your destination, you can change your route, you're free to do as you want. It does not limit you or restrict you. You're in control of the system. Excellent design. Similarly, the AI successes in text auto-completion and search auto-completion. Here I start typing University of Maryland in the search box, and I get a number of choices and suggestions of possible things to do. I can reject them all and keep typing, or I can select them. And similarly, spelling correction, good AI, grammar correction. Also, it highlights in a gentle way possible alternatives, and then I can choose them or choose to ignore them. So again, I'm in control. Another larger super tool is the Bloomberg Terminal. Provides huge amount of information for financial managers and stock traders. It uses a great deal of AI to sort out the 1.6 million articles it gets a day and hundreds of millions of data points from stock market trading all around the world. And it provides it to the user in a comprehensible, predictable, and controllable way. They set it up, they're in control. You get a tiled, non-overlap display with spatial stability, so they know where to look, and in a glance, they get the information they want. That's why more than 300,000 people pay $20,000 a year to have this on their desk. And I think the idea of Bloomberg terminals will spread to other disciplines as well. It's a concept, and it's a design principle that really carries and has strong possibilities. The idea of active appliances, every manufacturer of appliances now says AI embedded, AI this and that. And yes, we're seeing AI in thermostats and AI in rice cookers and in clothing washers and in clothing dryers or dishwashers. But still, there's a control panel that lets us know what's going to happen next. We can choose what we want to do. We can stop it along the way to put in, open the dryer to put in another clothing item, open the oven or change the oven settings to brown the chicken that we might be cooking. And so active appliances are the word I prefer to describe what I think is a wonderful set of possibilities. There will be active appliances in the kitchen. There'll be active appliances for home security, home control, for entertainment systems and medical systems as well. There are multiple devices you use at home. They need to be unified and built with a common user interface so that they're easy to use. But active appliances seem to be a strong possibility for tremendous benefits to many, many people. Here I mentioned medical ones. The pacemaker, which used to be thought of an autonomous device embedded in your chest, but now it's a device which by Bluetooth connection you control. So you can operate your pacemaker to account for whether you're going for a walk or you're not feeling well or other possibilities. And it provides detailed reports to Medtronic, the manufacturer of many of these pacemakers, as well as your clinician and others, so that they can monitor your health and performance and changes over time, and also monitor tens of thousands of pacemakers to improve their aggregate performance over time. That's the kind of multi-level human control that I encourage. Telebots is another phrase. The Mars rover, some people celebrate it as an autonomous device operating on the surface of Mars, and it's capable of autonomously moving around, avoiding objects, avoiding precipices, turning its antenna to point in the right direction, turning its solar panels to point to the best place to catch the most sunlight. However, at the same time, there's a control room with 80 people working to operate this Mars rover. So it's the right kind of blend. I prefer to see it as a telebot rather than an autonomous vehicle. Similarly, to me, the surgical robots are telebots. You'll see the journalists love to say about robots, surgeons do better than human surgeons. However, it's the human surgeons who are doing the job, even when they're using telebots. They're not using robots. And the company who makes these wonderful systems called Da Vinci, it says, robots don't perform surgery. It's right there, robots don't perform surgery. Your surgeon performs surgery with Da Vinci by using instruments that he or she guides via a console. That's the right idea. And this allows a physician to, with small incisions, reach deep into body cavities and perform unusual and remarkably precise operations of cutting, suturing, or burning if necessary. And so these instruments are really a wonderful way you amplify, augment, enhance, and empower the surgeon to be much more effective. Control centers, I mentioned the hospital ones, but even larger ones at counterterrorism, transportation, utility centers. They have people working together, provided by a huge amount of information. Information abundant displays are, to me, a virtuous and important design goal for many applications. And so that's how decision making gets made. Humans are in control, a great deal of automation at work at the same time. That's the blend we want to get. Okay, the third principle here is governance structures. And this is a more complicated one and takes us beyond the computer science alone to engage with political science and sociology and design principles. I see 4 levels of principles. There are 15 principles or recommendations for teams, software engineering teams. There are 5 technical practices that we will discuss briefly in a moment, but I'll just mention that organizations may contain dozens of software engineering teams, and that organization has to develop a safety culture. A safety culture is the way it works. With leadership commitment, proper hiring and training, failure and near miss reporting, internal reviews, and industry standards. Within an industry, there may be dozens or hundreds of organizations or companies, and now the processes of trustworthy certification become the great pressure and the points, the way we can influence large companies. So independent oversight through auditing firms has proven to be successful in the financial field and other fields. And we are moving towards the place where the large accounting firms and auditing firms are now becoming AI audit firms. Insurance companies have a role to play as well. We see how insurance companies successfully help in the building field, in transportation, and in medical care. The building field, if you want to make a building, you propose to the zoning board and it gets reviewed, you get a certification or approval, you build your building, and then the inspector arrives to give you a certificate of occupancy, and then you can get an insurance policy, okay? And that's what we need to see in the AI field as well. So for example, with safe driving cars, self-driving cars, the question for insurance companies now is, should they charge more or less for people who own a self-driving car? They don't know because they don't have the data. And I guess I ask you to take a moment to think about how many deaths do you think have come from Tesla cars? When I first thought about that question, I thought, 5, 6, 10, I'd heard about a number of famous stories. And it turns out there's a website called tesladeaths.com, tesladeaths.com. Take a look at that. And last time I looked, there were more than 200 deaths reported from Tesla cars. That surprised me. Now, not all of them were caused by the autopilot, and they're generated from public reports in newspapers from around the world. But we don't really have the full data. Tesla does not let us know. Tesla believes and reports that their cars are safer than regular cars, but their methods of counting that are questionable, and the data is not widely available for us to review. Just 2 weeks ago, the US National Highway Transportation Safety Administration announced they were conducting an investigation of the Tesla autopilot because there were 11 well-documented cases of Tesla cars while on autopilot hitting first responder vehicles on the road or on the side of the road, fire vehicles or ambulances or police cars. And it's not understood why that happened. And so they're conducting an investigation. These 11 crashes resulted in 1 death and many dozens of injuries. And so it's become an issue. And everyone agrees that self-driving cars eventually will be, we hope, will become safe driving cars. And so I think we want to focus on the safe driving first, actually, and then we'll get to self-driving cars. In the same way, we'll have to change the way highways are constructed, the way cars communicate with each other. And I think the idea of control centers, essentially air traffic control for self-driving cars, that regional control centers might monitor tens of thousands of self-driving cars and do their best to understand and improve the service. That's the way the Waymo system works in Phoenix, Arizona, where there's a central control center that can actually take over and teleoperate those self-driving cars if necessary. So there's a complex ecosystem that's evolving, and that's what I think we'll see for industry certification. The last circle is government, or last oval is government regulation, while industry consistently says, don't regulate because it'll interfere with innovation. And that is repeated again and again to the point that it's widely accepted. However, the evidence is not in support of that. That in previous work on automobile safety, seatbelts and construction requirements, and in automobile fuel efficiency, that government regulation and requirements triggered a huge innovation in the automobile industry. And now the automobile industry is very proud of its safety and fuel efficiency, and they see those as competitive advantages. Similarly, the European GDPR for protection of public data and the requirements of the right of explainability led to a huge innovation and 10,000 papers about explainable AI. So I think the right kinds of government regulation can work. The paper on this was published last year in ACM's Transactions on Interactive and Intelligent Systems. You can take a look at that, and it will be a key part of the book. We're going to dive in to look at software engineering teams and the 5 practices that I advocate. I'll just say a word about audit trails. I think just as civil aviation has become safe because of such practices as flight data recorders and cockpit voice recorders, the flight data recorders record what's happened on the plane, and if there's an accident, then a retrospective analysis of that flight data recorder can give a clearer indication of what went wrong. We need a flight data recorder for every robot, essentially, or every AI-empowered tool so that we know what happened. This is already common practice in the financial field, where, of course, every transaction has to be recorded and audited. And so when flash crashes occur, made by problems on AI and autonomous systems, there is an audit trail. We can do this for Tesla automobiles and for other systems where we have increasing amounts of AI. I think it's a great research topic as to what should go into an audit trail so that it's possible to reconstruct what went wrong. These other topics are longer discussions. I will focus just on explainable AI in the remaining minutes and give one example and one issue that I feel really strongly about, and hope some of you will take this up as research topics for your continuing work. The general notion of explainable user interfaces, as I said already, much of it triggered by the requirement for the GDPR that users get an explanation of what happened. The literature is almost entirely about what I would call retrospective explanations, usually called post hoc explanations. The discussion goes into whether they should be local or global. Global explanations are how the algorithm works and what the neural nets are doing, what machine learning and deep learning and so on are all about. The local notions say, for your case, if you've applied for a mortgage, a parole, or a job, then you should understand why you were rejected, okay? And that's the popular discussion, and the few user interfaces you'll see in the papers about retrospective explanations are usually a simple natural language sentence or two that describes what went wrong. I think that's just not a workable direction. Users need to query in depth and be able to pursue a discussion. So some systems pursuing now chatbots for explanations, I don't see much hope in that working out. What I prefer is to put in place a newer goal to prevent the confusion and surprise that requires explanation. So while the retrospective explanations are a kind of cure for the disease, I'd rather have a vaccine to prevent the disease. Okay, and what does that look like? It's what I call prospective. Some would call it anti-hoc user interfaces that are interactive, visual, and exploratory. Let's take a look. So first, let's see what a retrospective looks like for a simple case of a mortgage application. You enter the amount of mortgage you request. You enter your monthly household income. You enter your liquid assets. Again, a simplified example. You click on submit, and you get a response that says, we're sorry. Well, it apologized. Good start. Your mortgage loan was not approved. You might be approved if you reduce the mortgage amount requested, increase your household monthly income, or increase your liquid assets. That would generally be seen as a pretty good example of a retrospective explanation for AI systems. But think about an alternative where you get a set of sliders that you can adjust. How much mortgage you're requesting, your household monthly income, and liquid assets. And as you move them, you get either more or less blue for your score, and what your goal is to reach the score needed for approval. And you can then see which of these is most sensitive. I mean, is the liquid assets a linear differentiator? Is the household monthly income a quadratic differentiator? What matters here most? And how much can I change my life circumstances to get the mortgage that I see? Okay, so that's the idea. And it's been applied in many examples. This charming British example, I really enjoy it. The group of librarians set this up, and I was in touch with them. It's just cleverly done and wonderfully, just, you know, a really nice interface, which has sliders, and you get to choose 4 sliders. And here, when I put it to work, you choose between funny and serious, beautiful and disgusting, sexual content, no sexual content or explicit sexual content, and then optimistic or bleak. And as you move these sliders, the covers that are recommended for you change. I've seen the same kind of design in other recommenders, for example, for newspapers, where you get a slider for politics, sports, and entertainment. And as you move the slider, the recommendation window adjusts to show you more or less of exactly what you asked for. No explanation needed because you're in control, you know what's happening. Here's a music recommender that uses 5 of the 14 sonify attributes: acousticness, instrumentalness, danceability, valence, and energy. And as you move these sliders, you get different suggestions. The OECD has a better life index, things like that. And again, slider control makes it possible. So that's the story. And my summary is there's 3 things to take away from this talk. You can read lots more, but the HCAI framework to go 2-dimensional. Some would say maybe 3-dimensional or 4, but let's at least go to a 2-dimensional model. Think about the design metaphors and the very language that you use. And I suggest you shift to more realistic terminology that's been the basis for the huge commercial success of the 3 million apps in the app stores. And then for those involved in management strategies, the 15 governance structures are what you want to consider. These are all described in 3 papers that were published during last year. And you can get more information on the website for my efforts. The book will come out in January 2022. I've had some wonderful commentaries from people who have read this. The book is well structured and light to read, comprehensive coverage, but it will be controversial. I certainly hope so. And Virginia Dignam says a must read. Sean McGregor says human-centered AI is a moral imperative. And I'm very pleased about those commentaries. That's the cover. No robots involved, just lots of good tech and lots of people working together. This is the structure of the book. It focuses on the strategies for ensuring human values of rights, justice, and dignity, the individual goals we want to support, self-efficacy, creativity, responsibility, and social connections, and then the design aspirations of reliable, safe, and trustworthy, and the 4 levels of team, organization, industry, and government. Those are the 3 takeaway messages of this talk and of the book. And we always think about the context of the different stakeholders and the threats that we face in any system, but especially AI systems, of malicious actors, biased data, and flawed software. So that's my strategy. If I believe the future is human-centered, you can get involved, sign up for the Google group, human-centered-AI, and you can join the 1,400 people who are working hard to promote this novel way of thinking. It won't be easy, it won't happen quickly, but we're set to work on this, and we're set to change the world in a better way. You can follow us on Twitter, human-centered AI, or take a look at the website, hcai.site. That's the story. I hope you'll find a way to contribute to this movement and to make a future that is truly human-centered and serves people well, protects the environment, builds a sustainable future, and makes the world warmer, kinder, and ensures that people are more creative more often. Thank you. I'd be glad to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Ben. And we've got 3 questions that have come in already. Anyone else, keep your questions coming in over either Q&A or chat. So the first question, hi, Ben, great talk. Looking forward to the book. You were pretty dismissive of social robots and gave examples of companies that went out of business. Do you think there are possible cultural differences for the acceptance or adoption of social robots? For instance, the adoption acceptance of care robots seems to vary significantly by culture.
Okay, so the longest chapter of the book is about social robots, and I do make some distinctions that follow the social robot community. Yes, there are cultural differences, and it's often believed that in Japan, there's a great sympathy for social robots. However, and there is, well, just to say briefly, I was in Japan, it's now 2 years already, but I went looking for social robots, and there were highly advertised social robots for hotels and other kind of things, but the only one I could find was the Aibo dog robot in the Sony demonstration room. I did not see the presence of social robots. So we have to make some important distinctions here about what is a social robot. So in general, that community, and if you talk about social robots and human-robot interaction, the focus is on mobile, dexterous, human-like robots, okay? Mobile, dexterous, human-like robots, okay? So that social robotics community thinks about building robots that look and act like people, okay? If you have the Paro robot for, you know, the harp seal, right, robot, or you have dog robots for dementia patients, that's a different category. And those, I do see more promise in them. Paro has sort of limited success because of its $6,000 price tag, which means a patient only gets to have it for a few hours a week. Newer models, I talked to the developers, Ted Fisher of Joy for All, and I forgot the Tom, for Tombot. They're $150 dog robots. And those seem to be, you know, they're liked, they're inexpensive, each patient gets to keep it, and I see no problem with those. So they're not social robots in the full definition. Alexa and Siri are also, they're voice user interfaces. They're not social robots by most definitions of the field. So yes, that's why I say the combined designs in my diagram suggest there are ways of taking some elements of the social robot and combining them. And so the voice user interface, which is generally thought of as a human-like approach, turns out to be can be a valuable idea. And the dog-like or animal-like items can be a successful idea. But, you know, things like Sony's Aibo robot dog at $2,300 has not been a large commercial success. So watch, when you read the stories, I mean, let's just put it, the social robots, the highly advertised ones, like Asimo's, like Honda's Asimo, and then Jibo, Anki, and Kuri, all of them folded. They were highly promoted, they're gone. And just a month ago, the Pepper robot, the most widely successful small robot with 20,000 sales, its company claims, that shut down as well. So I just don't see it. And if anybody wants to respond, let me hear you, but I just don't see, there's not, you know, people don't want social robots. They're cute, they're entertaining, they're fun. They may be educational in some ways, but I don't see a large future for social robots.
Okay, I'm gonna jump the order of the questions a little bit, just because you touched on voice interfaces there. So Peter asks, earlier today we heard about voice-driven personal assistants such as Amazon's Alexa and Apple's Siri. How do these fit with your design metaphors?
I think I mentioned that. Yeah, I think they use some elements of social robots, which are the voice-like elements, and also the playful style in which it responds. But, you know, basically, I see them as active appliances operated by a voice user interface. They basically give you web search and other, you know, their most frequently used features are things like, you know, what's the weather, play some music, and those kind of, those kind of activities. And people will explore, and Amazon's been very clever in finding fun ways in which Alexa can respond to provocative questions. So I think that's clever on their part, but I would say voice user interfaces are what you should think about, and read the design guidelines for voice user interfaces.
Thank you. A question from Grant Stevens about the future of work and automation. So how do you feel is the best way of addressing the problems of automated systems turning specialists into supervisors and leading them to potentially lose that expertise, as presented in the book, The Glass Cage?
Which book?
The Glass Cage.
Glass Cage, no, I don't know that one. But, you know, the belief that robots were coming to take our jobs has evaporated. And, you know, Amazon in 2011 bought Kiva Robotics. At the time, Amazon had 125,000 workers. And the belief was that Kiva Robotics would essentially wipe out most of those workers. Here we are 10 years later, Amazon has 10 times as many workers, 1.2 million workers around the world with many, many, many robots. And the lesson is, to me, very clear that automation can improve quality of service and reduce price. And Amazon's success is partially due to its use of robots, but it increased the number of employees by a factor of 10. So that's kind of, the history of automation, whether it's the wool weaving machines of 200 years ago or the automated tellers of 50 years ago. The belief was the automated tellers would reduce the number of bank workers, but no, they've increased the number of bank workers and the number of branches because now banks provide additional services, and that's, the cash dispensing feature has become a simplified, quicker, less costly feature for the banks, and the banks now devote their energy to other things. So yes, there are dangers of de-skilling, I think is what's suggested in that, but I think those are legitimate concerns that we have to monitor. But I see attractions when we blend automation with human control, and the supervisory role that people have to play becomes ever more complex. I mean, you might look at the recent issue of the Mayflower. IBM teamed up with a group that made an autonomous ship, which was called the Mayflower, that sailed from Plymouth, repeating the 400-year-old story of the Mayflower coming to the US. And a few hundred miles into this trip, this autonomous ship failed. Some engine part broke, and it had to turn back as best it could, and then it went out and was retrieved by others. So we have to be careful about the humility is an important factor in design, to realize that failures can occur of many, many, many kinds. Algorithms work in closed systems. They're very tightly constrained, but the world is an open system. And the number of failures and the ways that failures can come and the way adversaries can attack are, I think, unbounded. And so we will continue to need to have approaches in which humans are still involved. Factory automation is a similar one. Toyota had a while ago worked to have a lights out factory, as it was called. Nobody working, all autonomous, but they turned the lights back on and they put back the supervisors because the supervisors could see what was going wrong. And they also had continuing ideas for how to improve the design of the systems themselves. So the threats you mentioned are appropriate, de-skilling or inappropriate excessive automation. But I hope that, the wisdom of good design will prevail, and all of us need to help make that happen. So thank you.
So I have a follow-up question, taking chair's privilege to throw my own question in about that issue of how do you identify when things go wrong, given that is an unbounded space of possibility. I mean, you talked about safety, safe driving cars rather than self-driving cars. Is that the general principle then, sort of gently towards automation?
Yes, I mean, I think combined with audit trails and control centers that, while there may not be someone in the car, it's being operated from a control center that can monitor it. And when things begin to go wrong, they can track what's happening. And if a failure occurs suddenly, there is at least an audit trail for retrospective analysis. And so you want to make sure that while accidents may happen, that type of accident happens only once.
Yeah.
And that you know about it soon enough. I mean, the problem with airbags is that there were many failures until people came to understand what was wrong. And so the evolution of design, the maturity of design should be accelerated by audit trails and by control center monitoring.
And I think we're probably on to the final question here because we're already over time. Tao B asks, Do you think in the future all AI-related development will be audited by third-party companies? So similar to the kind of financial auditing that PricewaterhouseCoopers does, or those big financial institutions?
The word "all" is is problematic. Of course, we don't need that kind of AI-related research or development to be audited. Although we're seeing the research community is increasingly moving towards self-monitoring and auditing of its own performance. NeurIPS conference, for example, introduced last year and is continuing this year with the idea that every paper must address the positive and negative social consequences of the research. And they've even rejected technically strong papers because they did not address the consequences. So there's some shift. It will still take a while. So I do not think we need to have auditing for research, for development, for small companies, for entrepreneurs. I think we need the auditing for large companies which are working at scale on applications that affect millions of people and which are not lightweight recommenders, but consequential and life-critical applications. So we need to get a more nuanced description and get beyond the word "all." We need to understand the different levels of harm that's possible from different systems, the scale and breadth of the harm and the depth and seriousness of the harm. I mean, recommender systems, if they go wrong and they suggest a movie or a restaurant that's not quite right, hey, that still could be fun and interesting and different. But if medical systems or transportation systems make recommendations that are flawed, that could be deadly. And so we need to have audits for those ones that have harm and make that distinction.
Ben, thank you very much. We're over time. That is a fascinating and broad-ranging talk. I'm looking forward to January and getting the chance to have a read of the book. So thank you again.
Thank you all for making this possible. I hope you'll make this video available on the web and that others can benefit. But I appreciate all the questions and the participation and look forward to more. Please join the Human-Centered AI Google group and we'll continue the discussion well into the future.
Fantastic. Thank you.